Black girl refuses to remove her hat at school. Teacher calls 911 after seeing what's underneath. The September morning air was already warm, but 6-year-old Aaliyah Bennett pulled her knitted red hat lower over her ears as she stood in front of the tall brick building of Fairview Elementary School in Louisville, Kentucky. Her tiny fingers trembled slightly, though she wasn't cold. She'd been here just a few days, but every morning still felt like the first. New faces, new rules, new expectations. And always, the same silent question from teachers and students alike. Why won't that little black girl take off her hat? Inside the school, room 1B buzzed with the excited chatter of first graders. Bright posters lined the walls, the alphabet in cursive, a calendar of birthdays, laminated rules about kindness and sharing. At the front of the classroom stood Miss Jordan Wilkes, a 29-year-old teacher with a reputation for calm, nurturing authority. She had curly auburn hair tucked into a low ponytail, glasses perched on her nose, and a quiet smile that made even the most anxious kids feel a little safer. When Aaliyah stepped into the room, Miss Wilkes greeted her gently. "Good morning, Aaliyah. I'm glad to see you again," she said warmly, crouching slightly to be eye level. Aaliyah offered a tight nod, clutching the straps of her faded pink backpack. Her knitted red hat remained firmly on her head, despite the school's no hats in class rule. It was pulled down low, almost to her eyebrows. "You can hang your hat with your backpack if you'd like," Miss Wilkes suggested, voice light and nonchalant. Aaliyah stiffened, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't. My mama says I can't take it off. Not ever." The teacher paused, caught off guard by the intensity in the child's eyes. There was no mischief, no stubbornness, only something else. Something heavy. "Okay," Miss Wilkes said, her tone even softer now. "That's okay. You can keep it on for today." By lunchtime, Miss Wilkes had already made several mental notes about her newest student. Aaliyah barely spoke, barely ate, and didn't smile. During partner reading, she sat alone. During playtime, she quietly moved to the edge of the room, fiddling with the hem of her sleeve. And every few minutes, like clockwork, her small hand rose to adjust her hat, as if ensuring it hadn't shifted even slightly. The cafeteria was loud with the echoes of trays and laughter. Most kids devoured their spaghetti and meatballs with abandon, but Aaliyah only pushed hers around. When the lunch monitor, a grandmotherly woman named Ms. Doris, gently asked her to remove her hat before eating, Aaliyah froze. Her spoon clattered to the tray. Her entire body seemed to shrink inward, arms wrapping around her head as if someone had threatened her. "No!" she gasped, eyes wide and filled with panic. "I can't. I'm not supposed to." Ms. Doris, alarmed, backed away and looked to Miss Wilkes for guidance. That evening, Miss Wilkes sat alone at her kitchen table, sipping tea that had long gone cold. Her laptop sat open in front of her with tabs of district policies, child welfare guidelines, and a blank document titled Aaliyah Bennett Observations. She hadn't written a single word yet. She remembered Aaliyah's tiny voice, the fear behind it, the way her hands shook when anyone mentioned the hat. This wasn't about fashion. It wasn't about culture. It was something else, something deeper. Miss Wilkes was no stranger to childhood trauma. Her own mother had fostered children for years. She had seen how pain could hide in plain sight, masked by polite smiles and whispered rules. And there was something about that red hat. Not just that it looked handmade, with uneven stitches and faded yarn, but the way Aaliyah clung to it like a lifeline. The next morning, Aaliyah came in the same way. Quiet, reserved, hat pulled low. And again, Miss Wilkes said nothing about it, but her eyes never strayed far from the girl. During reading circle, the students were sharing their favorite bedtime stories. When it was Aaliyah's turn, Miss Wilkes crouched beside her. "What's your favorite book, sweetheart?" Aaliyah blinked, her eyes darting to the other kids. Her voice came out small. "I don't have books at home." A hush fell over the immediate group. One student raised their hand to offer an extra book from home, but Miss Wilkes gently waved it off, returning her attention to the girl. "That's okay. We'll find one you like here." But as she turned back to the class, she noticed something alarming. When Aaliyah had nodded slightly, just slightly, her wince was unmistakable. Later that day, during free art time, Miss Wilkes crouched next to Aaliyah's desk again. The girl was coloring a house beneath a tree. "Is that your house?" she asked softly. Aaliyah nodded again, then grimaced. Miss Wilkes noticed her left eye twitch subtly, and again her hand rose to the hat, not to fix it this time, but to press it down. Miss Wilkes hesitated, then asked, "Aaliyah, does your head hurt?" A pause. "Long. Too long." "No," Aaliyah mumbled. But the lie was clear. That night, Miss Wilkes took a different approach. She reached out to the school counselor, Mr. Craig Fulton, who'd been working at Fairview for over a decade. They reviewed policy together. He told her gently, like a warning, "We have to be careful, Jordan. Without physical evidence, it's considered speculative. We can flag it, but we can't push." Miss Wilkes was unsatisfied. Her gut told her something was very wrong. So she took a risk. She wrote a handwritten note, slipped it into Aaliyah's backpack. "Dear parent or guardian, I'd love to meet you to get to know Aaliyah better and hear how we can help her feel safe and supported here at Fairview. Please call or email me." Then she included her personal number. She knew it wasn't standard, but Aaliyah didn't have time for protocol. The next morning, Aaliyah arrived in the same hat, but now with a thick turtleneck sweater that covered most of her neck and jawline. The temperature outside was nearing 80. The moment Miss Wilkes saw her, her heart dropped. At recess, Aaliyah didn't move from the bench. When Miss Wilkes joined her with a book, the girl flinched. "You okay sitting in the sun, sweetheart?" "I like the sun." But Miss Wilkes noticed how she kept tilting her head just so, trying to keep her face shaded. Sweat dripped from her temples, and yet she refused to remove her layers. Something wasn't right, and she was done waiting. At 1:43 p.m., Miss Wilkes quietly called the school nurse to her classroom. Nurse Beth O'Connell, who had seen her share of student injuries, sat beside Aaliyah while Miss Wilkes stepped out to give them privacy. 3 minutes later, Beth opened the door, pale as paper. "We need to call 911, she said quietly. "Right now. What did you see?" Beth looked back at the door, lowering her voice. "I asked if she could take off the hat for a scalp check. She started shaking. Said her mom would be mad. Then she started crying, Jordan, and when I lifted the edge just a bit..." She trailed off. "I think there's an infection. It's bad." Miss Wilkes didn't hesitate. She picked up the classroom phone, her fingers steady. "This is room 1B. We need emergency medical support. Now." She glanced at Aaliyah, still shaking under the hat, and silently promised, whatever was hidden under that hat, the truth was about to come out. And someone would finally protect her. The wail of the ambulance siren pierced through the humid Kentucky air as it pulled into the faculty parking lot of Fairview Elementary. Inside room 1B, the usual hum of crayons scraping and chairs squeaking had been replaced by thick silence. The students had been quietly escorted out by a substitute assistant. Only Miss Wilkes, Nurse Beth, and a trembling Aaliyah remained. Aaliyah sat huddled on the cushioned reading rug, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped protectively over her head. Her red hat, still tightly secured, seemed more like armor now. Her body was rigid with fear. Miss Wilkes knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe here, Aaliyah," she whispered. "Nobody's going to hurt you." Aaliyah didn't move. Her voice came out barely audible. "My mom said, if anyone sees, they'll take me away. They'll take me from her." Miss Wilkes's throat tightened. She glanced at Nurse Beth, who nodded toward the door as the EMTs arrived. Two paramedics entered swiftly but calmly, both wearing Navy uniforms and gentle expressions. One of them, a black woman in her mid-30s named Shonda, crouched near Aaliyah. "Hey, sweet girl." "I'm Shonda. You can call me Ms. S if you want." "We just want to make sure you're okay." Aaliyah blinked up at her, then slowly turned her face toward Miss Wilkes. "Are you going to tell them to take me away?" Miss Wilkes hesitated, then leaned in closer. "No, honey. I'm going to tell them to help you. That's all." After a few minutes of soft coaxing, Aaliyah finally allowed Shonda to gently lift the edge of her hat. What she revealed sent a wave of horror through the room. There, beneath the hat, were deep patches of missing hair, inflamed skin, and angry red welts. In some places, the scalp was broken and bleeding, with signs of severe neglect or possible chemical burns. The paramedics exchanged a quick look. "We need to get her to the hospital right now," Shonda said, her tone professional but shaken. "This isn't just a rash. This could be dangerous." As they prepared to move Aaliyah onto the gurney, she clutched Miss Wilkes's hand in a panic. "Don't leave me. Please, come with me." Without hesitation, Miss Wilkes nodded. She turned to the principal, Mr. Watkins, who had just arrived after being notified. "I'm going with her," she said firmly. Mr. Watkins, a tall, gray-haired man with an air of cautious diplomacy, nodded slowly. "I'll inform the district." "Go." The ambulance ride was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the dispatch radio. Aaliyah held onto Miss Wilkes's fingers tightly the entire time, as if letting go would send her spiraling back into something she couldn't escape. At St. Mary's Children's Hospital, the ER staff moved quickly. A pediatrician named Dr. Kira Malone conducted the initial exam. She was direct, compassionate, and quietly furious as she examined Aaliyah's scalp. "This looks like a case of prolonged scalp damage, possibly from lye-based hair relaxers or a chemical straightening agent," Dr. Malone explained. "And based on the scarring, it's not recent. This has been happening over time." Miss Wilkes inhaled sharply. Would a 6-year-old even ask for that? "Dr." Malone shook her head. "No. And definitely not with this level of intensity." This wasn't accidental. Within the hour, a caseworker from Child Protective Services arrived, a petite woman named Lena Ortiz, who carried both a notepad and a weariness in her eyes that came from years of listening to things no one should ever have to hear. "I understand she's new to the district," Lena began. "No previous school records?" "None. Her file says she just moved here from Tennessee, but no forwarding documents. Her emergency contact is listed only as her mother, Danielle Bennett. No phone number, just a street address." "That's unusual," Lena muttered, scribbling. Aaliyah, now lying quietly on the hospital bed, looked over at Miss Wilkes. "Am I in trouble?" Miss Wilkes sat beside her, brushing her fingers gently across the girl's hand. "No, sweetheart." "You're not in trouble. You're very brave." A pause. Then Aaliyah asked a question so honest it broke Miss Wilkes's heart. "Is Mama in trouble?" Miss Wilkes glanced at Lena, who met her eyes with a complicated expression. "That depends," Lena said gently, "but our job is to keep you safe." Later that evening, As the sun dipped below the horizon and bathed the hospital in a golden haze, Miss Wilkes received a call from the school office. It was Mr. Watkins. "We had someone show up here. A woman claiming to be Aaliyah's mother. She demanded to speak with you, but she was agitated. Security escorted her out." Miss Wilkes's blood ran cold. "Did she leave a message?" Mr. Watkins paused. "She said, and I quote, 'You tell that nosy little teacher she just made the biggest mistake of her life.' Then she sped off." Miss Wilkes looked over at Aaliyah, who had finally fallen asleep. Her chest rose and fell slowly, but her brows remained furrowed, even in dreams. The teacher stared out the hospital window, fists clenched. This wasn't just about a hat anymore. This was something bigger, something dangerous, and she had just stepped right into the center of it. The next morning, a pale gray sky hung over Fairview like a warning. The tension inside Miss Wilkes's chest had barely eased since the call last night. She hadn't slept. Instead, she'd sat beside Aaliyah at St. Mary's, holding her hand through the night as the child stirred in and out of uneasy sleep. By 7 a.m., she was back at school. The building that once felt warm and familiar now seemed sterile and watchful. As she stepped into the front office, she noticed 2 officers sitting near the lobby window. "Mr." Watkins greeted her with a cautious nod. She showed up again around 6 a.m., banged on the glass until security asked her to leave. Then she disappeared. Miss Wilkes rubbed her eyes. "Has anyone actually confirmed she's Aaliyah's mother?" Mr. Watkins motioned toward the conference room. "You should come hear what CPS found out." Inside, Lena Ortiz was seated at the head of the table, her eyes bloodshot behind her glasses. A thin file folder sat open before her. "She's not in the system," Lena said bluntly. "No birth certificate, no custody records, no medical history, no school enrollment trail." "So who is she?" Miss Wilkes asked. "That's the million-dollar question." Lena leaned forward, voice low and tight. "We suspect she may have abducted Aaliyah. There's a nationwide missing child report from 2 years ago. Girl named Aria Lennox, disappeared from a shelter in Birmingham. The age, physical description, and timeline match, but we don't have DNA confirmation yet." Miss Wilkes's breath caught. "She's not even supposed to be with that woman?" Lena nodded solemnly. "If our hunch is right, that woman isn't her mother. She's a former foster care aide who vanished right after Aria went missing." A beat of silence filled the room. "I think you may have just saved her life," Lena added. Miss Wilkes felt both chilled and shaken. Back at the hospital, things were unfolding quickly. Detectives were beginning to investigate the woman's true identity, and the media had caught wind of a mysterious incident involving a child and a teacher at Fairview Elementary. Rumors were swirling online, some of them ugly, many of them speculative. Meanwhile, Aaliyah, possibly Aria, was withdrawn, but no longer trembling. When Miss Wilkes returned to her side that afternoon, the girl met her with wide, steady eyes. "Are you really going to keep me safe?" she asked. Miss Wilkes didn't hesitate. "Yes." That single word carried the weight of everything she'd risked, her job, her safety, even her sense of control. But that promise would be tested faster than she expected. At 4:32 p.m., the hospital was placed under a soft lockdown. A staff member had seen someone matching the description of the alleged kidnapper entering the parking garage disguised in scrubs. Security footage later confirmed it. The woman had tried to gain access through the ambulance entrance before slipping away again. Miss Wilkes's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. "Miss Wilkes," said a cold voice, "you really should have stayed out of this." There was a pause, then the click of a call ending. She stared at the screen, hand shaking. "They're watching us," she whispered. Police increased surveillance at the hospital and assigned a patrol car to Aaliyah's room. Still, the situation had become national news. That evening, a news segment aired showing Aaliyah's red hat, now symbolic of something much larger: abuse, systems failing children, and one teacher who'd stepped up when nobody else did. Social media exploded. Some hailed Miss Wilkes as a hero. Others speculated that she'd overreacted or sought attention, but none of it compared to what happened the next morning. The school district issued a formal statement saying that Miss Wilkes had acted beyond her authority and was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. She stood alone in her classroom, packing a few belongings into her tote bag, when Mr. Watkins appeared at the door. "This isn't personal, Eliza," he said softly. Her voice was steady. "No, it's systemic." That night, she drove to her sister's apartment in Louisville. The exhaustion was bone deep now. But when she opened her laptop, a message was waiting for her from an anonymous email. It read only one line: "She's not the only one. There are more girls." Attached was a blurry photo, a group of children lined up in what looked like a motel hallway. One of them had a red hat pulled low over her eyes. Miss Wilkes stared in stunned silence, a sick feeling forming in her gut. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Eliza Wilkes hadn't stopped thinking about the email. The image of the children in that dim hallway clung to her like smoke. She'd stared at it over and over, studying every detail. There were at least 5 kids, maybe 6, none older than 12. And the girl in the red hat, the posture, the eyes barely visible under the brim, it was almost identical to how Aaliyah had sat in that first morning meeting. But what chilled her wasn't just the photo. It was the line: "She's not the only one." The next morning, Eliza sat in a corner booth of a Waffle House just off the interstate, hunched over her laptop, trying to trace the origin of the message. Whoever sent it had used a burner email and routed it through an encrypted proxy. Still, she wasn't giving up. If this was part of something bigger, she needed help. Real help. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she reached one she never thought she'd call again: Jordan Mayfield, former investigative journalist. Now a private investigator with a reputation for burning bridges and exposing uncomfortable truths. She hit call. "Didn't expect to hear from you again," Jordan's voice crackled through. "I need you," Eliza said without preamble. "I think this girl I helped, Aaliyah, she's connected to something bigger. I have a photo, a tip, and I'm being watched." There was silence for a moment, then the sound of keys clicking. "I'm in town. Send the photo." An hour later, they met at a nondescript coffee shop in the south side of Louisville. Jordan looked leaner, older, but his eyes hadn't lost their spark. After studying the photo, he leaned back, jaw tense. "I've seen that hallway before." Eliza's breath hitched. "Where?" He slid his laptop around. On screen was a series of archived articles, most over 5 years old. They all centered around the same scandal: a now-defunct religious group, the Shelter of Grace, which had operated group homes across 3 states under the guise of providing refuge to abused or abandoned children. But multiple kids had gone missing. Whistleblowers were silenced. Eventually, the group dissolved, or so everyone thought. "You think it's still running?" Eliza asked. "I think someone's resurrected it under a new name, and they're using these kids." She stared at the screen, rage boiling in her gut. "And you think Aaliyah was taken from one of those homes?" "I'd bet on it." That night, Eliza returned to the hospital to visit Aaliyah, now officially transferred into state custody pending the investigation. A uniformed officer stood outside her room, and the girl looked smaller than ever, knees tucked under her hospital blanket. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would." Eliza sat beside her, brushing a loose curl from the girl's face. Aaliyah, do you remember a place with bunk beds and no windows? Maybe with other kids? The girl froze. Her small hand clutched the blanket tighter. She nodded slowly. There was a man. He said if we told, they'd lock us in the freezer. He said no one would ever believe us. Eliza's eyes welled up. Can you tell me what it was called? Aaliyah's lips trembled. They called it the Haven, but it wasn't a haven. Back at her apartment, Eliza and Jordan dug deeper. They found that the Haven was registered as a religious retreat program in rural Kentucky. A non-profit shell company listed under a woman named Denise Holloway, an alias used by the same woman suspected of abducting Aria Lennox 2 years ago. That's her, Eliza whispered. That's the woman who came to school. That's the woman who raised her hand to that child. They had a name, a location, and now they needed proof. The next morning they drove out together, past the highways, past the sleepy towns, into back roads lined with sagging fences and rusting trailers. They reached a gated property with a faded sign, the Haven Center for Renewal. It looked like nothing, which was why it terrified Eliza even more. They parked half a mile down the road, hidden in brush, and Jordan set up a small drone. As it buzzed over the property, they watched live feed on his laptop. 3 small buildings, a greenhouse, and behind one of the sheds, children. At least 7. All being led back indoors by a tall woman in scrubs and a man with a walkie-talkie strapped to his hip. Eliza's stomach twisted. We need to call someone. We need more than that, Jordan muttered. We need a way in. They didn't have long to plan, because while they were watching the Haven, someone was watching them. That evening, back at Eliza's apartment, her door lock had been tampered with, a chair knocked over, her files gone. Only one thing was left behind, a note on her bathroom mirror written in red marker. Stop digging, or she disappears. Again! Eliza stepped back, heart pounding. She turned to Jordan. This isn't just about rescuing one girl anymore. No, he said, voice low. It's about taking the whole thing down. And in that moment, Eliza knew. If the system wasn't going to save these kids, then she would. The sun had just started to rise over the sleepy hills of Kentucky, casting a pale orange glow over the trees that lined the dirt road leading to the Haven. In the quiet hum of morning, Eliza sat beside Jordan in the passenger seat of his black SUV, clutching a thermos of coffee she hadn't touched. Her nerves buzzed like a live wire. There was no turning back now. I hacked into the Haven's supplier records, Jordan said, tapping his laptop. Every Thursday, a catering truck drops off food. Non-profit paperwork says it's a church-sponsored meal program, but get this, the vendor doesn't exist. You think it's a front? Eliza asked. I think it's our way in. That afternoon, Jordan posed as a delivery driver. He'd found an old box truck, printed a fake catering company logo, and thrown on a white cap. Eliza stayed hidden in the back, tucked between crates of decoy food supplies. If they were caught, there'd be no explaining it. No rescue. The gates of the Haven creaked open. A tired-looking guard waved them through without checking credentials. You're late, he grunted, squinting at the clipboard Jordan held out. Traffic, Jordan muttered. Cops pulled me over. The guard rolled his eyes and waved them on. The truck bumped along a gravel path until it stopped behind a squat building that looked like a converted gymnasium. The door opened. A woman in scrubs stepped out, short, with pin-straight brown hair and cold eyes. Denise Holloway. Unload by the kitchen, she snapped. Jordan obeyed. When she disappeared inside, he tapped twice on the metal wall. Eliza slipped out, quiet as a shadow, ducking behind stacked crates and heading for the rear of the building. Inside, It was worse than she'd imagined. The facility had no real lighting, just industrial fluorescence flickering overhead. The halls were silent, the doors locked. But behind one she heard whispers, small voices. A child coughed. She pulled a bobby pin from her pocket, heart pounding in her chest. A few clicks. The door creaked open. 6 children sat huddled on thin mats. Their eyes snapped to her, wide and silent. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here to help." A girl, maybe 9 years old, shook her head violently. "They'll come. They have cameras." Eliza stepped inside anyway, crouching. "What's your name?" "Sierra," the girl murmured. "And do you know Aaliyah?" She was here. "But she tried to run. They took her away. Said she was sick." "Sick how?" "They cut her hair." Eliza's blood turned cold. That explained the scar. Suddenly, the hallway echoed with footsteps. "Hide," she mouthed, ducking behind the open door. A man in khakis and a flannel shirt walked by, keys jangling from his belt. He paused. Eliza held her breath. Then he kept walking. Back at the truck, Jordan was stalling, chatting with another worker, pretending to unload boxes, but his eyes kept darting toward the main building. 10 minutes passed. Then Eliza returned, heart racing, sliding into the passenger seat as Jordan slammed the back shut. "Go," she whispered. As they drove off, Denise Holloway stepped out again, watching the truck disappear. Her gaze narrowed. She pulled out a phone and hit speed dial. "They were here," she said. "We have a problem." That night, in Eliza's apartment, the reality of what they'd witnessed hit them like a freight train. The children weren't just being held. They were being stripped of identity, silenced, and likely trafficked under the radar of state systems. And Aaliyah? She had escaped. But barely. That scar wasn't from an accident. It was from someone trying to erase who she was. "She knew," Eliza murmured. "She remembered just enough to be dangerous." Jordan leaned over the table, tracing out a plan on a paper napkin. "We need media. Exposure. If we go to the authorities now, they'll bury it. But if we give this story to someone who can't ignore it—" "No," Eliza interrupted, her eyes hard. "Not yet. They'll retaliate. We have to get those kids out first." "Then we do it ourselves?" "No. We find someone inside. Someone who's playing both sides." Jordan hesitated. "I might know someone." The next day, they met with a social worker named Carmen Willis, a weary-eyed woman who had once worked with displaced children from troubled foster homes. She didn't flinch when they showed her the photos. In fact, she nodded slowly, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "I tried to report this 2 years ago," she said. "No one listened. My boss said I was paranoid. Then they cut my hours. I got the message." "You still have access?" Jordan asked. She smiled, bitter. "I have more than access. I have keys." That night, they put the plan into motion. Carmen would use her ID to gain entry during a scheduled wellness check. Eliza and Jordan would follow in a separate car, ready to get the kids out through a service door once the guards were distracted. It was dangerous, it was reckless, and it was their only shot. But across town, Denise Holloway was preparing too. She had traced Eliza's email. She had seen the drone footage. And she had called in her final insurance. A man named Trenton Ray, a former deputy turned mercenary, who made problems disappear. "She's too close," Denise said. "She won't be by morning," he replied. And as Eliza lay awake that night, unable to sleep, a pair of headlights parked across the street. Watching. Waiting. The night air was heavy with tension, the kind that pressed on your chest like a weight. Eliza sat in her car outside Carmen's building, her fingers tapping nervously against the steering wheel. Jordan was beside her, silent for once, his eyes scanning every shadow. They were waiting for Carmen to return with the access cards and floor plans to the Haven. She was supposed to be gone 10 minutes. It had been 22. "Something's wrong," Jordan muttered. Eliza nodded, already grabbing her phone. She dialed. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Before panic could settle in, a notification popped up on Jordan's laptop screen. Motion alert. Front door camera. He opened it quickly. The black and white footage showed a shadow slipping through the hallway in Carmen's apartment complex. Hood up, no visible face, then static. "Someone cut the feed," he said. They burst out of the car and sprinted toward the building. The elevator felt like it crawled upward. Eliza's heart pounded so hard it muffled the ding of the 6th floor. As soon as the doors opened, they ran. Carmen's door was ajar. "Carmen?" Eliza called. No answer. They stepped inside. The lights were still on. A mug of coffee sat half-drunk on the kitchen counter, steam long since gone. The couch cushions were scattered. One of Carmen's shoes lay in the hallway, and in the center of the living room floor, written in permanent marker on a manila folder, were 4 chilling words. "Back off. Last warning." Jordan turned pale. "They know everything." Eliza picked up the folder. Inside were the documents Carmen had promised: blueprints of the facility, access codes, emergency exits. Carmen had left them behind, intentionally. She knew she was being followed and dropped the only thing that could still help. "I'm not backing off," Eliza said quietly. Jordan nodded. They left quickly, moving through side streets to avoid any tail. Back in her apartment, Eliza laid out the blueprints and spread them across the kitchen table. Every inch of the Haven's layout was detailed. There were 3 underground rooms, all listed as storage. Carmen had highlighted them. "Those aren't storage," Eliza said. "That's where they keep the kids they want to break." "Solitary." Jordan stared at the diagrams, his jaw clenched. "We don't have time. If they know about Carmen, they'll be moving the kids." "We have to go in tonight." Eliza hesitated, then reached for her phone. There was one more person she hadn't called yet. Her godfather. Special Agent Marcus Tate, a man who had spent 30 years in the FBI and was quietly running a private investigative firm in Atlanta. He was one of the few people she trusted completely, and the only one with the kind of connections they'd need if this went south. "Uncle Marcus," she said when he picked up, "I need help, and I need you to not ask questions. Just listen." There was a pause. "You're in trouble again," he said calmly. "This time it's not just me. It's kids. A lot of them. Being held illegally in a place called the Haven. We have proof. We're going in tonight to extract them." "Eliza, listen. No, I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for cover. If we fail, they'll disappear, those children. If we succeed, I need someone to make sure the media hears about it before it's buried." There was a long silence. Then quietly, "Send me everything." Eliza hit send, then looked at Jordan. "Let's move." They returned to the Haven under cover of darkness. This time there would be no disguises, just precision and purpose. Eliza wore black cargo pants, a jacket with inside pockets for tools, and a baseball cap pulled low. Jordan carried 2 flashlights, a lock breaker, and the camera rig he'd custom-built to stream live video. "We stream everything," he said. "If anything goes wrong, it gets out immediately." They approached the facility from the rear fence, slipping through the trees until they found the same side service door Carmen had flagged on the blueprint. Jordan clipped the lock breaker onto the keypad. It buzzed, cracked once. Then the light turned green. They were in. Inside was silent. Too silent. They moved carefully down the hallway, passing the infirmary, the staff lounge, and finally reaching the lower levels. Then Eliza saw it. Aaliyah's name. Written on a clipboard outside a room labeled Behavioral Correction Unit 3. She opened the door. The room was cold, concrete, dimly lit. Aaliyah sat curled in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes hollow. Her hat was gone. A strip of her scalp was stitched crudely, still red and angry-looking. The sight of her made Eliza's throat tighten. "Aaliyah," she whispered. The girl blinked. "Ms. Eliza? I'm getting you out of here." Footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy, fast. Jordan hissed, "We're not alone!" Eliza scooped Aaliyah into her arms and ran. Jordan covered the door behind them as two guards burst from the stairwell shouting. Eliza ducked into a hallway, turned left, then right, breath ragged. She spotted the emergency exit and charged. Alarms blared. Jordan slammed the door open. The cold night air hit them like a slap. They ran into the trees, disappearing into the shadows as floodlights flickered on behind them. Sirens in the distance. Marcus had kept his promise. In a parking lot 5 blocks away, a black SUV pulled up. A tall man in a leather coat stepped out and opened the back. "Get in," Marcus Tate said. They jumped in without hesitation. As they sped off into the night, Aaliyah leaned her head against Eliza's shoulder. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. Eliza didn't answer. She just held her tighter. And behind them, the haven burned, not with fire, but with something worse. Exposure. The SUV barreled through the city's dimly lit back roads like a silent missile, headlights cutting through early dawn fog. Inside, the tension was electric. Eliza sat in the back, still holding Aaliyah close. The girl's small frame trembled, not just from the cold, but from the trauma that clung to her like smoke after a fire. Jordan monitored the live stream on his laptop, his fingers flying as he scrubbed through the footage they had captured inside the haven. Faces. Names, rooms, everything was there. Marcus drove in silence, eyes fixed on the road, his jaw tight. "We need a place to lie low," Jordan said finally. "They're going to come after us hard." "They already are," Marcus replied. FBI chatter picked up emergency pings from the haven's directors. They're trying to spin it as a break-in by domestic agitators. If we don't control the narrative, they will. Eliza's voice cut through the air, low and sharp. Then we put the truth out before they can bury it. By the time they reached Marcus's safe house, an unassuming split-level home hidden in a quiet suburb, the sun had begun to rise. Eliza helped Aaliyah settle onto the couch, covering her with a blanket, while Jordan set up a secure Wi-Fi hotspot. Marcus poured coffee and handed it to Eliza. "You've started a war." "I didn't start anything," she said. "They did when they thought they could disappear black kids without anyone noticing." Jordan spun his laptop around. "I've got it. The footage is clean. We upload this now. The public sees what's really happening behind those gates." "Wait," Marcus interjected. "You want to go public before we have federal backup? The government won't move fast enough. You'll just give them time to scrub records, relocate staff, bribe officials." "I'm not waiting anymore," Eliza snapped. "I've played by the rules before. They didn't help." She looked at Aaliyah, who was finally sleeping. Then back to Marcus. "They shaved her head, Marcus. Because of a hat." "Because she refused to obey. You want me to wait for red tape while they do that to more girls like her?" The room went quiet. Marcus sighed, then pulled out his phone. "Fine, but we do this smart." He made a series of calls to former colleagues. trusted journalists, advocacy groups. Within 2 hours, the footage had been distributed to multiple outlets, local and national. Eliza narrated a voiceover explaining everything they had found, ending with a chilling statement. They thought no one would care, but I care. And now, you should too. The video went viral. Within 4 hours, it had 2 million views. By evening, it passed 5. Protests began outside the Haven, parents, activists, former students. The pressure mounted fast. Under media scrutiny, the facility was forced to issue a statement. It was vague, dismissive, denied any wrongdoing. But it didn't matter, because one of the nurses had seen the video and reached out. Her name was Cara Dean, and she was done being afraid. Eliza met Cara in a parking garage downtown. The nurse looked exhausted, eyes ringed with dark circles, hands trembling slightly as she passed over a flash drive. This has everything, Cara said. Surveillance clips, internal memos. Orders from higher up. Eliza's breath caught as she scanned the files. One memo was addressed to Dr. Hugh Langston, the head administrator at the Haven. The contents made her blood run cold. Subjects flagged as non-compliant should undergo corrective isolation, use chemical assistance if necessary. Maintain narrative integrity. Emotional instability due to family trauma. Avoid media leaks at all costs. They weren't just punishing kids, Eliza whispered. They were drugging them, gaslighting them. Why didn't you come forward sooner? She asked Cara. I was scared. I needed the job. But after your video, I couldn't keep quiet. I'm sorry. Eliza nodded. You're doing the right thing now. As they prepared to leave, Jordan received another alert, this time from a whistleblower tip line they'd set up earlier that day. It was from someone inside the State Education Board. The message read, Hugh Langston is being protected. He's related to a state senator. If you want to take him down, you'll need more than just the footage. You'll need to expose the whole system. Eliza felt the weight of it all hit her at once. This wasn't just about one corrupt school or a rogue administrator. It was an entire web. You in? She asked Jordan. He gave a wry grin. Too late to back out now. She turned to Marcus. You still got friends in D.C.? Fewer than I used to, he said, but the right ones. Good, she said. Because we're not stopping. Not until every name on that memo is exposed. Later that night, back at the safe house, Eliza tucked Aaliyah in. The girl stirred slightly, her hand reaching out to grip Eliza's. You're not going to let them take me back, right? Never, Eliza said. You're safe now, and I promise you, no more hats. Aaliyah gave a faint smile and drifted back to sleep. Eliza stepped outside, the cool night air hitting her face. She looked up at the stars, knowing this was far from over. But at least now the world was watching. And so were the people who had everything to lose. The cold morning air crackled with the chants of protesters gathered outside the Haven. Dozens of news cameras captured every second as people held signs reading, "Protect our children" and "Shut it down." Eliza stood at the edge of the crowd, her face calm but her eyes scanning for threats. Next to her, Aaliyah clutched her hand tightly. The girl was no longer the silent, shaking child from days ago. There was something in her posture now, something resilient. Inside the state capitol, chaos reigned. The viral footage had sparked outrage not just online, but within political circles. Under intense media pressure and a deluge of calls from furious constituents, Senator Thomas Langston, the very man implicated by the whistleblower, held a press conference to clarify his position. He stood stiffly before the podium, flanked by staffers and police. My office was unaware of any improper conduct by Dr. Hugh Langston. "We do not condone mistreatment in any form," he said, reading mechanically from a script. But as he spoke, a new bombshell hit the airwaves. Jordan had just uploaded the files from Cara Dean, the whistleblower nurse. Included in the release was a series of emails between Senator Langston's office and the Haven, detailing not only prior knowledge of the abuse, but also deliberate efforts to quash internal investigations. The headlines were immediate. Senator linked to child abuse cover-up, state-funded silence. Back at the protest, Eliza's phone buzzed with non-stop updates. Reporters wanted interviews. Victims were stepping forward in droves, former staffers, parents. Even state workers. The scandal had gone nuclear. Then came the twist no one expected. A secondary document uncovered in the files suggested that the Haven was only one of several behavioral reconditioning facilities operating under different names across the country. Most targeted marginalized communities, Black, Indigenous, and immigrant children, using nearly identical language to justify isolation, forced medication, and psychological coercion. This wasn't just a rogue facility, Eliza said in a press briefing outside the Capitol steps. This was systemic, institutional, and funded by taxpayer dollars. She turned to the crowd. And if they could do this to one girl because of a hat, imagine what they've been doing in the shadows for years. Inside the building, panicked legislators began scrambling. Emergency committees were formed. Investigations were launched. Senator Langston was forced to resign the next day. Dr. Hugh Langston, already in custody, now faced a slew of federal charges ranging from child endangerment to conspiracy to violate civil rights. But even with those victories, Eliza knew it wasn't enough. That night, she sat down for an exclusive interview on national television. The host leaned in, eyes wide. "Why did you stay silent for so long about who you really were?" he asked. Eliza looked into the camera. "I wasn't silent. I was observing. I needed them to treat me like any other Black woman walking into that school, asking questions. I needed to see the truth without filters, without respectability armor. And they gave it to me, loud and clear." The host leaned back, stunned. "You're not just any investigator. I'm a federal civil rights prosecutor." But titles didn't matter when I watched a child get handcuffed for refusing to remove her hat. What mattered was stopping it. The broadcast aired in prime time. Millions watched. In the days that followed, Congress convened hearings. The Department of Education announced a sweeping review of all youth residential programs. A new hotline was created for students and families to report abuse. And Eliza, she founded the Aaliyah Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting vulnerable children and holding abusive institutions accountable. Aaliyah was placed with a loving foster family, one that allowed her to be herself, hat and all. At the foundation's launch event, Eliza took the stage, flanked by Aaliyah, Marcus, and Jordan. Her voice rang with clarity. "They thought no one would notice." But we did. They thought we wouldn't fight back, but we are. And now, we're just getting started. As applause thundered around her, she looked down at Aaliyah, who grinned and tugged her baseball cap down proudly over her tight curls. The screen fades to black. Then a final message appears. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention. Stand with us. Speak up. Share this story. Because what's under the hat shouldn't be fear. It should be freedom. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, we invite you to support the movement. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that expose injustice, uplift the unheard, and inspire change. Your voice matters. Help us make it louder.